to our last lesson in Daniel. You all are stepping in at the very end. So I don't know if any of you know much about Daniel or familiar with the book at all. So we've been in it for a while, and we're in chapter 12. We actually are going to start in chapter 4, or the first 4 of chapter 12. Before we do that, let's have a prayer. Our Father, we thank you for blessing us with your word. Thank you for blessing us with having a record of servants of yours like this man Daniel. It's such a blessing to be able to see how other people of faith lived what they had to deal with, and how you dealt with them personally in Daniel's case, and help us to learn from that, and help it to change us. Help open our minds and our hearts as we look at this morning. We pray this through Jesus' name. Amen. So this is, we're in the middle of or actually kind of the end of a vision that started back in chapter 10. And this is just to keep it in context, just remember, probably the best way to get something out of this is trying to think of it from Daniel's perspective, and why would God send this vision to Daniel? Why would he do that? And actually at the end of the chapter is a pretty good clue of that, because it says a lot of confusing things. Chapter 11, which we had gone through before, had like a ton of things that are really hard to understand. He's talking about the king of the north and the king of the south, but and we know that there's Egypt involved, and that it's the Antiochus Epiphanes, just based on comparing this with the history that we know, secular history. And then in chapter 12, let's just go ahead and read that. The first 4 verses. At that time, Michael shall stand up, the great prince who stands watch over the sons of your people. There should be a time of trouble, such as there never was since there was a nation, even to that time. And at that time, your people shall be delivered. Everyone who is found written in the book. So there's comfort, right? Your people are going to be delivered. Everyone who's found written in the book. And many of those who sleep in the dust of the earth shall awake, some to everlasting life, some to shame and everlasting contempt. And those who are wise shall shine like the brightness of the firmament, and those who turn many to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. And that's where we kind of left off. And then he says this, verse 4, but you, Daniel, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end. Many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. So thinking about that. Oh, speaking of Fred, there he is. Your name came out. It always does, right? So any thoughts on this verse 4 there? So you have this vision. Daniel's being told, shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end, and many shall run to and fro, and knowledge shall increase. Well, think of that practically, right? Daniel, how is Daniel, going to shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end? How would Daniel do that? This man, he's living, he's pretty powerful man in this, in the Persian Empire at the time. But how's he going to do this? How's he going to seal up, or shut up the words and seal the book until the time of the end? How would he go about doing that? Yeah. Let me bring this back to you. It's worth
Do you mean physically or spiritually, or is that what you're trying to say?
yeah, or both, or
I
physically.
Physically, the word book really is scroll. So back then, they would seal a scroll with the wax and the span, and it would be, and clearly Daniel, through inspiration, must have written this, had to be preserved somehow through God's providence, whatever you call that. And isn't this sealing it up until a certain time, then you go to Revelation? Who can unseal the book? The scroll, who can unseal it? Only Jesus the Lamb. So this scroll and that scroll, I mean, they gotta be the same.
So you have two, so you have a, because how long does Daniel have to live at this point? Yeah, he doesn't have, he's getting toward the end of his life. I mean, he's in his last empire, right? In the last of the three empires that he was part of. And so that what you said, Kim, makes sense. But you know, we've got the words, so he wrote them down somehow, but after he dies, he doesn't have control over it anymore. It's in somebody else, God's or whatever.
Well, I have a couple of notes in my Bible. One on verse 3 that said for verse 2, some to everlasting life and some to shame and everlasting contempt. And I don't know where they got this, but they said that between those two judgments would be the 1,000-year reign of Christ. And on verse 4, it says it was impossible to understand the significance of these prophecies in Daniel's own day, but God indicated that the time of the end, many would seek to understand these quotations and be able to do so.
Right. That was, when I hear that, I think of somebody who's premillennialist, right? Thinks of that. That's the person who believes that Jesus is going to come back and reign for 1,000 years. And so that's why I'm very careful with commentaries on Daniel, is because of that fact. Yeah. That doesn't mean that you can't clean some stuff out of it. Because, like I said, you know, whenever we read this, what would Daniel think? What would this mean to him? Well, we'll get to that. Other thoughts on that? Carrie.
You know, I see this, those first verses as this spiritual resurrection. There's going to be this coming of trouble, but in that, the comfort is in verse 3. There's going to be many, it says, those who turn many to righteousness. So there's going to be this converting period for people during this struggle. And that's sort of comforting that there is this chance to reach out to others and bring them to righteousness.
Yeah, in the middle or after having their whole ability to do sacrifices being ended, which that would, send Daniel into a tizzy that was ended. And you're welcome. Of course. But so comfort. Isn't that would comfort Daniel, that something good is going to come out of this. And many shall run to and fro in verse 4, and knowledge shall increase. Do we run to and fro now? Yeah, I do. I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm trying to stay grounded. And the world definitely runs to and fro because the winds of doctrine, right, are like this and what people believe. All right, so let's read the last few verses of this chapter and see what we can glean from them before we do a quick overview of the book. So here's what it says, starting in verse 5. Then I, Daniel, looked, and there stood two others, one on this riverbank and the other on that riverbank. And one said to the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? And I heard the man clothed in linen, who was above the waters of the river, and he held up his right hand and his left hand to heaven, and swore by him who lives forever that it shall be for times, and a half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all these things shall be finished. Although I heard, I did not understand, and I said, my Lord, what shall be the end of these things? And he said, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. Many shall be purified, made white, and refined, but the wicked shall do wickedly, and none of the wicked shall understand, and the wise shall understand. And from the time that the daily sacrifice is taken away, and the abomination of desolation is set up, there shall be 1,290 days. And blessed is he who waits and comes to the 1,335 days. But you go your way till the end, for you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. So, to help understand this a little bit, get a little bit more understanding, I think it would be helpful to go back to chapter 10, just kind of read a few verses there at the beginning to kind of get an idea of what the setting of this is. And verse 4, I think, is probably a good place to start. And on the 24th day of the first month, as I was standing on the bank of the great river, that is the Tigris, I lifted my eyes and looked, and behold, a man clothed in linen, with a belt of fine gold from Uphaz around his waist. And his body was like beryl, his face was like the appearance of lightning, his eyes like flaming torches, his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze, and the sound of his words like the sound of a multitude. So this is the man in linen that we just read about. So what does it say happened here in verse 5? So Daniel's standing there on this riverbank. He's standing on the bank of the river Tigris, right? And he's looking up and he goes, oh, there's two others. Other what? Other angels, other men. There's one on the riverbank with him, and there's another on the other side of the river on the riverbank. And then this man in linen, but it's not just linen. It sounds just like the description of Jesus in Revelation 1. So is this Jesus? Yeah, maybe it is. And he's this man is hovering above the waters of the river. So you have these two angels on either side of the riverbank, and here you have this man in linen. But remember how he's described. Just picture this in your mind. Right here, hovering above the water, maybe in the middle, is this guy. He's got a belt of fine gold. His body's like a barrel. His face is like the appearance of lightning, and his eyes are like flaming torches, and his arms and legs like the gleam of burnished bronze. And he's hovering there over the water. And then let's pay attention to what he says. So he's one of the people on either side, one of the angels, asked Jesus, probably, how long shall the fulfillment of these wonders be? Great question. We all want to know that, right? And this is the answer. He says that, basically, he holds up his hands to heaven, right? And then he answers. And he swears by him who lives forever that it shall be for time, times, and half a time. And when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered, all things shall be finished. So what does he swears this oath, right? So it's not just him saying something, it's like saying it really strongly, this is going to happen. And he says that there's going to be for a time, times, and half a time. So that's a duration. So when you look at time in the Hebrew, it just means for a season. Right? So what does a season usually mean? Well, that's probably 1 year, right? But it's not specific. A season could be for a few years. It doesn't say here. And even with the contents, you can't tell that. So it could be a year. If it's a year, it's times, and then times, or time, 1 year, times at least 2 years. Could be more, but at least 2 years. And then half a time, a half a year. So that's where you get 3.5 years from. That's where the 3.5 years, if it's a year. But I don't think that you can say that. I don't think that you can say specifically that that's 3.5 years. The way, from the context of all of this is there's no way that Daniel needs to know a time as specific as 3.5 years, and we'll get down to the days. He doesn't need to know that. He just needs to know that it's, you have a short time, a little bit longer time, and then a lesser time than that. And what does he need to know out of that? That it's going to come to an end. And it's probably not going to be whenever he's alive. So, but that's what this being says. And verse 8, what does Daniel say? Although I heard it, I didn't understand. It's like, that's us. Right, I don't know. My Lord, what shall be the time of these things? Wrong.
What I'm wondering is Daniel being shown prophecy of end times or the return to Jerusalem, perhaps. It's really hard to understand what's happening here.
It is. Well, let's look.
Because Daniel never went back to Jerusalem, right? He stayed in Babylon.
Yeah, as far as we know, he never left. He never set foot in Jerusalem again.
Right.
So, yeah.
I don't know. It's just something I wonder. This is so hard to think.
It is. And that's why, because God gave it to us like this. It's hard it's hard to be able to get too specific with it, as far as regimented time frames.
Excuse me, I had never thought of it thought of it before, but how long was Christ's mission on earth?
How long was
Christ's mission on
what? How long was Christ's mission on earth?
earth?
Well, about 3 years, right? And then
Three and a half years.
you got something in there.
I
Yeah.
never thought of it.
3.5 years. Huh. Kim? I never thought of that before either.
Oh, what about Revelation 10 and 11, where a lot of the same language is used? The book, take the book, and the angel whom I saw standing on the sea and on the land lifted up his right hand to heaven and swore by him who lives forever and ever, who created heaven and the things in it, and the earth and the things in it, and the sea and the things in it, that there shall be delay no longer. But in Daniel, there's delay. And then it goes on in 11, and it says, and there was given me a measuring rod and a staff, and someone said, rise and measure the temple of God and the altar and those who worship in it, and leave out the court which is outside the temple, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the nations, and they will tread underfoot the holy city for 42 months. On and on, so maybe this is destruction of Jerusalem. The Jews are going to be wiped out, Christians will later be persecuted, and then, the land is now, we're going to be evangelizing and bringing all, like Daniel, his in a vision even said, people will go and bring others to the knowledge.
Right. So that sure sounds like, God stepping back in to John this time and saying, okay, this is where we're going to do it. Using that same language and that very, very similar language and no delay this time, where there was before. Yeah, excellent. Thank you for bringing that. Terry.
So we've got some, obviously, there are various scenarios that would fit that 3.5-year period, just from history. The Roman War against Jerusalem, 3.5 years. Desecration of the temple by Antiochus, 3.5 years. But then Jesus himself in Matthew 24:15 says, therefore you shall see the abomination of desolation, which are the words that Daniel just used, spoken by Daniel the prophet. So stand in the holy place. Let him understand. So, then he goes on, and we know chapter 24 is talking about the destruction of Jerusalem and how you're going to flee and be safe if you listen to these words. And so, when you see the same wording, this abomination of desolation, that is this word-for-word quote from this passage in Daniel, it makes you wonder, okay, is that the period that we're talking about?
It sure does fit the best, and my estimation. I'm not perfect, but yes. Yeah.
And Jesus quoting it.
And Jesus quoting,
Daniel
right.
said it.
And so if Jesus quotes it, then that's it, because he's the word.
Yeah.
Right? And that going along with, where's the phrase that was used? At the end of verse 7, and when the power of the holy people has been completely shattered. When is the power of the holy people completely shattered? And that's the destruction of Jerusalem. That's unquestionable. That's when, because they all before they at least had their records, right? But this was the last temple. It's shattered. There's no more sacrifices after this. The Old Testament law, any way of keeping that going, is gone. It's taken away. And Jesus mentions it, and it seems to mention this here And when Jesus died, having the veil of the temple torn, that's like almost like a precursor of the destruction of Jerusalem happening. So what was I going to say? Wanted to talk about the temples just a little bit, because whenever you look up the history of the Jewish temples, they say weird things. Because you follow the Bible, right? How many temples are there? There's one tabernacle, and then there's 3 temples. But a lot of people talk about Herod's temple as the second temple, but it's not. It's the third temple, because the first temple that Solomon built got torn down at 586 BC, whenever Jerusalem was sacked by the Babylonians. So it's torn down, and then whenever they go back, after Nehemiah builds the walls, then they finally rebuild the temple. And so that's the second temple. And that's torn down in order to make way for the new Herod's temple. And it's hard to find information about that, but it was all in the same place. So they would have had to tear that temple down in order to build Herod's temple. So that's actually not the second temple, that's the third temple. But that's the last one. That's what's destroyed in 70 AD, whenever Jerusalem is finally sacked by the Romans. And the Jews actually burn it by mistake, because they're all holed up in it. And all of their records are destroyed. So there's no, they don't know what tribe they're from. There can be no priests after that. Not that they were really being that careful, but they were somewhat, from Jesus' time. But they had these chief priests, and they were politically assigned more than what the Bible says. And there's no such thing in the Old Testament about chief priests. There's just the high priest and then the other priests. So, verse 9, go your way, Daniel, for the words are closed up and sealed until the time of the end. And that, from what we're seeing, sounds like from Jesus' ministry till the destruction of the temple in AD 70. And many are going to be purified and made white and refined. And Kim, like you were talking about, now the court around the temple is taken away in God's mind, because now all his people are everyone. There's neither Jew nor Gentile, neither slave nor free. Everyone is in God's kingdom now. There's no Jew or Gentile anymore. God looks at it totally different. Any thoughts on that? The abomination of desolation is either Antiochus Epiphanes or AD 70, when the temple's destroyed. And about the days, again, some of you might have looked at it, 1,290 days divided by a year, that's about 3.5 years. Again, so there's that 3.5 years. And blessed is he who waits and comes to the 3,335 days. But the 13 is what I key in on this. For me, it helps me to put this all in context. Where here's Jesus telling Daniel, but you go your way till the end. And what he tells him here, think about what this would mean to Daniel. What if you were told this? Think about what it would mean to you. Go your way till the end, for you shall rest, and will arise to your inheritance at the end of the days. Personally telling Daniel, he's pretty much assuring a place in eternity. How comforting is that? Then, so just go your way till the end. Just go, go your route that you're taking, following me, and you're going to rest, and you're going to arise in your inheritance at the end of the day. So that is, I think, a really strong comfort to Daniel at the end. So don't worry about this so much. Here, this has been given to you, but does it change what you do? No. Does it change where you're going to end up going? No, not personally. You have great comfort at the end. Any thoughts on these last few verses before we go into the review?
I think you summed it up pretty good right there.
Thank you. Yeah, just Jesus did pretty good, didn't he? Yeah. So now let's go back and just think about, because remember when we were going through this, we kept talking about what do we learn about the character of Daniel from all these different events in Daniel's life? What do we learn about the character of Daniel from this last section here before we go on? What do we learn about his character? Any thoughts on that? Dee?
He never wavered. He was a gentle soul who never wavered.
He never wavered. He was a gentle soul, he said, that never wavered. And how many people that we have recorded in the Bible can you say that about?
Noah and Job and Daniel were the three that never wavered.
No,
Job.
Job and Daniel. And I mean, Job did, although that's what it says in Ezekiel. Those are the three that are mentioned in Ezekiel. And Noah went through some tough times, and Daniel did too. Job went through some personally tough times. But most of the others, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, right? You could look at the history of them. What the Bible shows us, it's not, it shows them in it's not a rosy picture of them. It's more of an accurate picture. They were just people like us, doing the best they can, and yeah, they sinned, and yeah, they did make good choices too as they went through their lives. And Daniel, of course he sinned, but we don't see it. For some reason, the Bible doesn't show that. He seems to be a really steadfast man, and what he went through. What are your thoughts? Thank you, Dee, for sharing. Other thoughts of Daniel as a man, Daniel as the book. What do we walk away with? Carrie?
Just the character that, like in chapter 10, verse 19, when he said, "You're greatly beloved." I mean,
Yeah.
what do you say after that? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
The pinnacle of what we all hope to achieve, that God says, "You are greatly beloved."
You are greatly beloved. And what's that, another man in the Bible where that similar language is used? Yeah, and then Jesus, this is my beloved son, right, in whom I am well pleased. So, and it seems like, even though he told him that Daniel didn't let that go to his head, right? He seemed like he really kept his feet grounded, and he was humble. Other thoughts on Daniel and what he was like? Yes, I don't know your name, but
My name is Casey.
Casey.
Just going back to chapter 1, when I think about Daniel, I think of him as a man of integrity. How he was, a slave brought to a new land, forced to change his name, abandoned his religious beliefs, and there's so many forces that make somebody fall. But no matter what, he held on to his faith, and he continued, even though he was threatened and he could have been killed for that. He still held fast to beliefs in his faith in God, and that delivered him throughout his whole life.
Yeah, that's a great summary. Even from the very start, when he was a very young man, maybe 20 some odd years, when he was brought over from Jerusalem into a strange land. It's a stranger in a strange land. Different customs, different religious practices, and the opportunity is there. You're away from your whole the Jewish or the religion was their culture, right? And that's the way Jesus designed, Jesus and God designed to be a religion for a nation. And so now he's taken out of that. And what does he do? He still stays faithful to God. And then just time after time after time after time, and he still remains faithful. So takeaways from Daniel personally. What can we get personally from?
Well, I wanted to focus a little more on Daniel.
Okay, sure.
Remember in the Assyrians? No. Who was before the Babylonians?
The Assyrians.
The Assyrians. They didn't really care much about the people they conquered. The Babylonians, however, they took who they thought they could re-educate and they handpicked people.
Yeah, mix them in right there.
Yeah, re-educate them, right? Remember, that's in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And Daniel not only stood out when he was in Babylon, but he obviously was a man of outstanding character when he was in Jerusalem. And I was back there getting a drink or something, but he never wavered to the left or to the right. He remained faithful, even though everything that he was accustomed to was taken from him. Remember how he wouldn't eat their food? Oh, I can't eat that. They probably served, I don't know,
Bacon.
pig or something.
Bacon.
Yeah. You didn't know what he was.
They keep the delicacies, right? Honey baked ham, I don't know.
Yeah, the fact that he stood out in both arenas, so to speak, I'm going to call them arenas, is that he was very loyal to the God that he probably never saw physically, or he never saw him. He believed what God said.
He demonstrated the courage of his convictions.
Yeah, demonstrated the courage of his convictions, and he demonstrated that he believed what God told him.
Right.
Yeah, excellent point, Kim, and then Bruce.
what you said brings to mind that even though Judah, the whole country was going to be wiped out, Daniel's the perfect example of the remnant. And I'm sure he wasn't the only one. There was still a remnant. And what a beautiful picture of those faithful people, even though they were in the midst of this horrible, destruction and carrying away.
So, right, so that, and we've talked about that through this, right, haven't we? About he's kind of the, wouldn't want to say the head, but he definitely gives us a picture of what the remnant was like, because we see personally what he was like. Bruce.
Well, he's mentioned several times in Ezekiel, by Ezekiel, as an example of righteousness. And, when
Contemporary.
you try to model something that Daniel had in your life, you gotta look at his faith, his prayerfulness, certainly his courage, and his